Dr. Reiner Fuellmich, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dr. Reiner Fuellmich is the leading lawyer and member of the German Corona Investigative Committee and specializes globally on the prosecution of fraudulent corporations. You might have heard of him from the famous Nuremberg 2.0. Dr. Reiner Fuellmich, thank you. Reiner Fuellmich, thank you so much for joining us this evening or this afternoon for you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Look, for the sake of the audience, I always do this. Could you please just give us a brief career history and what led you to spearheading Nuremberg 2.0?
Well, I prefer not to call it Nuremberg 2.0, but I know that a lot of people have tried to pin that on me so that a lot of hopes, very high hopes are riding on what we're doing here. But first of all, I'm not the only one. I'm just one of many. The Corona Investigative Committee was founded by my friend Viviane Fischer. She's an attorney here in Berlin, and myself on July 10th of 2020. Before that, I was completely in line with the mainstream. I did have some suspicions because of my law practice. I had been going after the larger German global corporations, such as one of the most criminal organizations in the world, Deutsche Bank, VW, and the world's largest shipping company, Kühne and Nagel. I did have my suspicions, so did all of my colleagues, because it looked like the cards were stacked against us in these cases in the courts of law. In the meantime, of course, we've learned a lot, and the cards are not just stacked against us. It's a fact that the other side, Catherine Austin Fitz calls them Mr. Global, but that the people who are behind this agenda, and we have come to the conclusion that this is an agenda that's being rolled out, that these people have been infiltrating our societies for decades. It is hard to imagine, but this is the conclusion that we've come to, not just through the World Economic Forum, not just through their Young Global Leaders or Global Young Leaders program, which produced graduates like Angela Merkel and Bill Gates, and of course Jacinda Ardern and Macron in France, and what's his name, Justin Trudeau in Canada. But to make a very long story very short, my wife and I were still in the U.S. at our ranch in Northern California when we received the news. This is in March of 2020 rather, when we got all these phone calls from our friends and relatives telling us about a lockdown, which I thought, this is ridiculous, this is crazy. And the stories that we heard reminded me a lot of what had happened during the swine flu, even though I had forgotten most of it. And because I couldn't understand what was going on, I got in touch with my friend Wolfgang Wodak, Dr. Wolfgang Wodak. He's the man who more or less, hang on one second, single-handedly stopped the swine flu some 11 years ago. He was capable of doing that because he's a doctor, lung specialist with lots of experience, and he was then in a position of power. He was a member of the German Parliament, and he was a member of the Council of Europe. And that's why he managed to expose that hoax back then as a mild flu. However, even then, the very same protagonists, including Professor Dr. Drosten, he's the guy who invented the PCR test, which he claims can tell us something about infections, which is a complete lie. That guy and his British counterpart, Neil Ferguson, both of them are blatant liars. They had come very far. They had, in fact, helped the pharmaceutical industry introduce their vaccines even then. It didn't work that well in Germany, but in the Scandinavian countries, they vaccinated lots of people. And through this vaccination now, there's 1,300 children, young adults now, who are permanently disabled because they suffer from narcolepsy. So that's how it all started. My wife said, we've got to go back. We've got to do something. You know how to fight these bastards. She used other words, of course. So you got to do it. You got to find some allies and go ahead. And I said, I don't think I'm going to find any allies because the Germans, in particular, the German judiciary is a bunch of cowards. They're in it for the money. They're in it for their careers. I don't think I can count on anyone. But Wolfgang put me in touch with Viviane Fischer. She's not in it for the money. She's in it for the cause. And we set up the Corona Investigative Committee on July 10th. Wanted answers to those questions, which we believe our government, which is not our government anymore, and the mainstream media, which are owned, of course, by the same people who are owning this Corona pandemic, that they wouldn't give us any answers to. How dangerous is the virus? How reliable is the PCR test? And how much damage do the anti-corona measures do? In the meantime, we know that it's devastating, and that's why we talk about crimes against humanity. The latest evidence is so compelling that I just spoke with Dr. Mike Yeadon, former vice president of Pfizer.
I was about to ask you about this, because what I've heard is that this is not about money. This original plan was to roll it out back all the way in 2050, but they've accelerated it. And this recent finding from Mike Yeadon and others is that this is worse than what happened in World War II. And we've found evidence, undeniable evidence, that this is a kill shot, either being used to murder or maim people. Could you please go into those findings for us?
Yes, this is the most recent findings that Dr. Mike Yeadon came up with, but he does emphasize he's not the only one. This is a group of 5 or 6 scientists. It's just that he's the one, I think, who connected the dots. And I don't know if have you seen his video, the one that it's a BitChute video, and I think he calls it compelling evidence for premeditated mass murder. This video shows in great detail, and we're going to do this again tomorrow on our next Corona committee session. It shows in great detail how, and he's focusing on 3 vaccine makers, or they claim it's vaccine. We know it's not vaccine. It's not even experimental gene therapy. It's experimental gene manipulation. This is what we're talking about. And so he took a closer look at BioNTech, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. And the evidence that he showed us is really so compelling that we think we're going to make this a centerpiece of our international criminal trial, which will start in a couple of weeks. And it's going to be probably going to be a grand jury investigation, asking the jury, which is the people, for indictments against 4 of their figureheads, Bill Gates, Drosten, Fauci, and Tedros of the WHO. But the findings that he showed us is that all three of these vaccine makers, quote unquote vaccine makers, are deliberately, they're looking for lethal doses. They're trying out the dosage. I forget the precise technical term he used, but we're going to come up with it tomorrow on our committee. It is very obvious that if you follow the lot numbers, I think the British call it charges, or batches rather, but the Americans call it lots. So if you follow these lot numbers, there's some that don't seem to cause any problems whatsoever, at least not now. As we have learned from one of our scientists, Professor, she's a biologist and immunologist, Ulrike Kemmerer from Würzburg University, even those shots that seem to be harmless, if it is mRNA, they shut off your immune system. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die immediately. No, you're not. But sooner or later, you're going to run into a virus or some kind of illness, and your body won't be able to fight it because your immune system has been shut off. But some of these charge or lots are so dangerous that if you look at them and follow them through the United States, in that case, 36 states of the United States, they were extremely harmful, caused thousands and thousands of deaths all across the country. And from the way that he explained it to us, it seems very, very obvious that they did this taking turns. First Moderna, then BioNTech, Pfizer, then Johnson & Johnson. And you could also see that they were sort of taking breaks in between. And there's a couple of lots that were completely harmless again, and all of a sudden it starts again with these very lethal batch lots rather.
What do these breaks signify? What do they mean, the fact that they took breaks?
I think we're trying to establish a baseline, something like that, but we're going to look into this in greater detail. By the time that we start our criminal investigation, our grand jury investigation, we will have the complete story. But even now, it is so compelling, it is undeniable and irrefutable that this is what they're trying to do, trying to figure out how to kill as many people as possible without alerting too many people. Because if they had used these lethal doses right from the start, it would have killed everyone, and everybody would have been, ooh, I don't think I'm going to get this shot. So that's why they're trying to figure out a way through which they can cause a lot of harm, but in such a way that people will not be alarmed. It is devilish. It's just we looked at each other and we just couldn't believe it. How can people be so evil? So evil.
I will find the video that you're talking about from Mike Eden.
I'll send it to you.
I'll upload it onto my website for the viewers so that they can see that afterwards. So let me get this straight. There have been, just to recap, there have been batches released purposely by these big pharma giants.
Yeah.
Placebo, knowing that they're saline shots, then knowing that they're releasing kill shots, taking a break, releasing some more saline, releasing some more kill shots on purpose, knowing full well what they are doing.
That is the conclusion that we have arrived at. It is inescapable. There's no benign explanation for what they have done. This is not innocent. This is intentional.
You made a comment recently that this is not about money, Dr. Fuellmich. Can you talk to us about what that means?
Yes, the people who are behind this, maybe 300, maybe 3,000, we don't know. It's not very many people, but the people who are behind this and who are they have so much money, they don't need any more. They can buy tens or thousands of yachts if they wanted to, because they've stolen so much from us. They don't care about money, but they're using money. They're using money to buy politicians, mainstream media people, doctors, lawyers. Those are the two tools that they use in order to get people under control to do their bidding. Money, bribing them, and the other tool is extortion. And this extortion thing is very, very difficult to figure out. We do believe that ritual child abuse plays a big role in this, but money is very
Why
obvious.
do you believe that? Why do you believe that? Is there evidence to suggest
we had whistleblowers approaching us and telling us about this. And 18 years ago, I know a little bit about that scene because 18 years ago, I represented some of the victims of this ritual child abuse. A friend of mine who's a well-known member of the German journalistic scene, and myself, I did the legal work, and he published it even on our national public radio and television until they stopped him because they didn't want him to do it anymore. And my ex-wife, she couldn't handle it anymore. So I know a few things about this. I just couldn't believe how big it possibly is. It may be much bigger than we think, but we don't have enough evidence for that yet. So I'm not going to make this public yet.
Sure. So we're saying that all of these global leaders are taking part in this. If this is part of it, this ritual child abuse, how does it tie in with this depopulation plan?
Well, we think, after having spoken with a number of psychology and psychiatry professors, we think this is a huge psychological operation. It has been planned for at least 3 decades, maybe longer. And they're using all kinds of panic mongering tools We have, for example, here in Germany, the so-called panic paper was leaked. It was written by the German Secretary of the Interior, and in detail, in great detail, it explains how to get the population to panic. For example, we want to make children feel responsible for the tortured death of their parents and grandparents if they don't wash their hands, if they don't wear masks, etc. That's what it says explicitly. This is insanity. That's why we believe the people who are behind this are psychopaths and sociopaths. They're using many, many puppets because they're bribing them, or there's extortion. We don't know. But it's not about money. They're using money, but they don't want money. Ultimately, money plays a big role in this because we believe that it's the financial industry, or better put, the financial mafia, BlackRock, Vanguard, which they are using as vehicles to invest their money in. And then these funds invest their money in Deutsche Bank, VW, and all the other international global corporations, thus owning through, I think, 147 corporations owning pretty much everything on this planet. So this is what's been going on for at least 30 years or so. It was about to blow up. This financial mafia scheme was about to blow up in 2008 and 9, which is when we had the first financial scandal. It started out as a housing scandal in the United States. I coincidentally had been going after these people, after Deutsche Bank in particular, for the same crimes which had been committed in Germany since 1992. But I guess it's because of the fact that the German courts of law, for some reason, now we know why, because they were stacked by their own people, didn't want to follow up on this. They felt motivated, Deutsche Bank and others felt motivated to play this game on a much grander scale in the United States. That's where the whole, we now call it predatory lending scheme started. This should have blown up in 2008 and 9. Lots of people stepped forward, including our chancellor and our then Secretary of Finance. We're going to get these people. They're going to have to pay a price. No one paid a price. The only thing that happened is that they started to print money, truckloads of money. In September of 2019, this whole thing was about to explode again, but they wanted to explode, but they wanted to explode, or implode rather, on their terms. They want to, because there's no other way. There's no other way to solve this problem, because if this explodes in an uncontrolled way, then the people will understand that it's we now call them the Davos clique, the people who regularly meet once a year on this platform of the World Economic Forum, all of them crooks and gangsters, mafia-like structures, then we would have found out that it's these people and they're mingling with, it's the corporate, the self-appointed corporate elites and the self-appointed political elites. The political elites are their own. They've bought them. They've trained them through their Young Global Leaders program, for example. Private-public partnership means a hostile takeover of our politicians by them. We think it's our politicians. No, it's theirs. So this whole thing would have exploded, and we all would have found out about it. And they wanted to keep us from learning this, and that's why they needed a distraction. And that's why in December of 2019, they came up with the corona pandemic, even though there were no cases. They needed to create, that's what drove them into an early start, and that's why they're making so many mistakes, apart from the fact that most of them are stupid as hell. But they're making many, many mistakes, and that is helping us because they were driven into an early start. They didn't have any cases. Even in Wuhan, China, which is where they claim the whole thing started. We don't know if it's true. They didn't have any cases. So what they needed is cases. Why did they need cases? Because they needed to declare the international, what is it called? The public health emergency of international concern, or short, FAKE, PHEIC, fake. So obvious, it's in our faces. But in order to declare this, and why did they need this? Not for the mask mandates, not for social distancing, but they needed it for the introduction of untested new drugs for the vaccines. Because that is the only basis on which they can use untested new drugs, on the basis of an international health emergency. And that's what this public health emergency of international concern is there for. Didn't have any cases, so they called Drosten, he's neither a professor nor is he a doctor of medicine, he's a fake. So they called him and told him, just as they had done 10 years earlier or 20 years earlier during the bird flu, come up with a PCR test that will tell us about infections. And he claims he did that. The two basic lies on which everything rides here come from him. One is there are asymptomatic infections. Of course, there aren't any. And even if there were, they don't play a role in this. The most recent study is that which was conducted in Wuhan with 10 million people involved. This is at the end of 2020, and it shows there are no asymptomatic infections. And this is a question of just of logic. You know, if you want to go, if you go see a doctor and tell him I have a problem, the first thing the doctor is going to ask you is, what symptoms do you have? What are you going to say? I don't have any, except Drosten and Fauci. Yeah, right. Go see an exorcist, something like that. So there are no asymptomatic infections, but he needed that, or the WHO, which promoted his ideas and recommended them to the entire world, they needed this in order to make everyone afraid of everyone, because even if you look perfectly healthy, you pose a potential danger, according to their logic. And then he came and said, but I do have a solution for this, because I have invented a new PCR test and I can tell you precisely who is infectious and who isn't. That is the second lie. I'm saying lie because we can prove that he lied when he said asymptomatic infections, because he was referring in a preprint, he was referring to a woman who traveled into Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, from China. And he pointed at her as an example of someone having absolutely no symptoms, but being very infectious because she infected some people down in southern Germany, in Bavaria. But another scientist read this preprint and pointed out to Drosten, you're wrong. This woman did have symptoms because she was eating anti-flu medication, and you don't do that because it tastes so great. And ultimately, it turned out she had been infected by her own parents, and of course she had symptoms. She was sweating, et cetera, et cetera. Second lie, he says, I have invented the PCR test, which will tell you who really is infectious. And of course, that's a blatant lie, because PCR tests, as the real inventor, Kary Mullis, has said over and over and over again, is not for diagnostic purposes. It is for scientific purposes, but not for diagnostic purposes, because it cannot tell the difference between dead and live matter. So when you test positive, it is very likely that it tests positive because the test finds the fragments of your body's immune system's fight against the common cold or the flu. It cannot tell the difference. Also, for someone to be infected with a virus, you need a whole virus to enter your cells and start replicating there. These tests, the Roche machines, all they see is fragments of a virus. They never see whole viruses. So for these two reasons, and there's others, for these two reasons, it is absolutely, totally, completely impossible for a PCR test to tell you anything about infections. On top of this, Drosten, and following his lead, the World Health Organization, which used his PCR test as a blueprint, they set the test so that it was guaranteed to create false positives. Last night, Mike Eden said, Reiner, I think all of these cases were false positives, not just 97%. Why is he saying that? Well, you take what you get from the nose and the throat, the swab, you can't see anything because it's invisible to the human eye. So you put them into the machines, all of them owned by Roche. They're making truckloads of money right now. And in this machine, you magnify the stuff that's in there. It's called cycles of amplification, 2, 4, 8, 16, whatever. At 24 cycles of amplification, I think you're in the billions of magnifying this stuff. At 24 cycles of amplification, even the Frankfurt Health Institute says we disregard anything that's beyond that because it makes absolutely no sense. Mike Eden says, remember, he's the former vice president of Pfizer, and he was their chief science officer for 16 years. He says at 35 cycles of amplifications, you end up with at least 97 positives. The Dresden test and all the others were set at 45. So that's how they created the cases in order to be able to declare the public health emergency of international concern, in order to walk us through, make us obedient, to walk us through mask mandates, social distancing, lockdowns, until finally we would agree to anything to have this end. Anything meaning the deadly shots.
And speaking of the deadly shots, we now know that these, according to Karen Kingston, also an ex-Pfizer employee who's been analysing the patents, that these undoubtedly all COVID-19 vaccines approved by the World Health Organization have tracking abilities in them. They will not approve them if they are not able to track citizens. So on that note, knowing that these are kill shots, knowing that they're able to track people, what are they trying to really do here, Dr. Fuellmich? Are they trying to reach this Davos clique, this goal of a reduced population that are easier to control? Is this the final goal?
I think it's twofold. They want, and they euphemistically call it population control, but it's really about population reduction. Some people say that they want to reduce us to 500 million. I don't know if that's true, but population reduction is one of their major goals. That is definitely true. Even Robert Malone, who said that if somebody had told him this a year ago, he would have said, yeah, right. And myself, I mean, had you told me this a year and a half ago, I would have said, go take your pills, go see a doctor, and things will get better. No, in the meantime, we're running out of conspiracy theories. So this is one of their major goals. The other one is, and that's why all this tracking stuff comes into play, the other is to control the rest of us, to make us really into slaves that will not think, that will not fight back, but that simply do as they're ordered. So that's why they're trying to control us, why they're trying to manipulate our DNA through these mRNA shots. There's lots of experiments within this gigantic experiment going on. We don't know what's in the shot, only they do. Our governments, as I said, are not our governments anymore. They're completely controlled by the other side. This is especially true here in Europe, where they're about to install the first mini world government, the real world government, as the Pope, who's also in on this, declared in his, what was it, Fratelli Tutti thing in 2020. He said, we must all submit to a new world government under the UN. Yeah, right. But they're going to start with Europe. The program that the agenda that they're following here is called HERA, Health Emergency Response Agency. And this is going to be the net result after it turns out that our national governments are incapable of dealing with this grave threat of the coronavirus. I don't think they're going to get that far because too many people have woken up in the meantime. And even here in Europe, where much of this is playing out, even here in Europe, people are taking to the streets again. Hundreds of thousands of people everywhere in Italy, in particular in the former East European countries, and even in Germany again. So they're not going to get much further than this.
We've seen many people taking it to the streets, Dr. Fuellmich, but it seems like the plan just keeps accelerating. Do we think that it's actually making a difference to these people that so many are protesting?
I think it is. It's a question of time until it will be absolutely impossible for them to sweep any of this under the rug. They've been able to do this because they have complete control of the mainstream media. But it is more and more obvious that even though nobody knows anyone who died of COVID or who suffered serious damage of COVID, all of a sudden everyone knows someone who suffered serious problems, even death, after vaccination. And this is another thing. The latest figures are telling us, and this was confirmed by the CEO of an American life insurance company, that since the beginning of the measures, in particular, since the beginning of the shots of the vaccinations, we have had, for the past year or so, we have excess mortality of 40%. This is unheard of, totally unheard of. This cannot be swept under the rug much longer.
I agree. And some mainstream have had to start reporting. They don't have a choice because too many people are talking about the people that they know that are now disabled or dead from the kill shot. You mentioned the 4 people, Gates, Tedros, and a couple of others, this trial that's going on. Can you give us more detail about that?
I think it's we have put a lot of time and energy into this because we believe that is so important, because there's so many people out there who are talking about Nuremberg 2.0. What they really want is they want us as lawyers and as scientists who are going to be our experts. They want us to show them the facts, and they want us to give them a legal platform on which they can safely resist. We've come to this conclusion after we discussed this in great detail, in particular with people, very smart people like Catherine Austin Fitts, who knows a lot about this, the aforementioned financial mafia structures, which are doing their best to distract our attention from what they've been doing. We need not, of course, we want, this is a formalized proceeding patterned after the American grand jury investigation, which shows all of the evidence we have with real experts, with real witnesses, with real attorneys. We're going to have a real judge, all of the evidence to the jury, which is going to be our viewers, and then ask them to return to give us indictments against Drosden, who is their major puppet as far as the PCR test is concerned, Fauci, Tedros, and of course, Bill Gates. I don't know how important these people are. They're probably just figureheads. Maybe Bill Gates thinks that he's one of them who pulls the strings. I don't think he is, but we'll see. But much more important than these indictments is to give the people full information, verifiable information from real experts, people who really know what they're talking about. And Robert Malone, for example, he was on the other side for a very long time. He knows everything that's been going on there. So does Peter McCullough. So does Catherine Austin Fitts. I mean, she was a member of the American government for a while, and she's also a very experienced investment banker. So all of these people, including many of the politicians who have joined our ranks, will testify in great detail to what has really happened, to how this is a long-planned agenda which is being rolled out in order to distract our attention from what is really going on. And what's really going on is population reduction and population control. And what is really going on is the deliberate destruction of our economies for the benefit of American platforms such as Amazon, for example. Whistleblowers have been telling us that at the same time the Chinese are taking over our and the American car industry. We don't know how true that is, but there's some evidence that shows us that it could be true. But whatever we're seeing, it is 2 things: deliberate destruction of our economies, deliberate destruction of our health.
And what can we, first of all, so this is happening in an international court, correct?
Yes.
What we've seen in local courts is truly corruption of judges that throw out cases. What are the chances of that happening in the international court if all of these big players are in on it?
Excellent question. I just spoke with a couple of my colleagues here in Germany. I just spoke with them a couple of minutes before we started your show. We think that if we're lucky, we're going to run into individual judges who are still willing to uphold the law. However, here in Germany, that is next to impossible. Why is that? Because Germans traditionally have been very obedient for at least 150 years. Bismarck started all this. It's especially bad in the judiciary, because back in the day, 150 years ago, you could only join the judiciary if you were completely in line with the government. So this is not an invention by Hitler. He made it worse, yeah, but it's never gotten better. And right now we can see the results of this decades-long education. That has to change. I believe that if we want to make an inroad, if we want to make progress on our international judicial levels, we're going to have to start on an international level. We're going to have to show the people that we, the people, are in charge. We do not need their system. We, for example, even the American colleagues and our South African colleague have been telling us we're starting our own judiciary. We're already working on this because the system is so corrupt, we can't depend on them anymore. This is not just true for the judiciary, it's also true for the economic system, for the education system. We're going to have to start our own system. We're going to have to disconnect from these global corporations and global NGOs, revert and focus on our regional economies, on our regional governments, because this is really what it is. It's back to the roots. That's democracy. That's why I joined this new party, grassroots party here in Germany, because they truly believe that the only people who really know what's good for them is the people in the region, in our own communities. We cannot allow these people to control us through a world government. No way. We've seen where this got us. This is where it got us, and it can't get any worse. That's why we have to fight back, set up our own systems, including our own system of law, so that we can have all these regional governments. We can connect. Each of us can connect. All of these separate systems can connect, but we should never again allow any global entity to rule over us. Like this is what the WHO is doing right now. No one, not even the lawyers, understand about the, what is it called, international health regulations. This is an invention of the WHO. This is not democracy. Democracy is when we vote for someone who is going to represent us in parliament. No one has elected these people at the World Health Organization. I mean, keep in mind, Tedros, the guy who runs the show, their major puppet, I think they filed a criminal complaint against him in New York last year for genocide. And I've seen pictures of him wearing a gun and dead people behind him. So this is who we're dealing with. It's the mafia.
Terrorist. He is a known terrorist.
He's a known terrorist.
He's giving the World Health advice all of a sudden, wanting to save humanity through the World Health Organization's solutions. It's unbelievable. What are the possible consequences for these murderers? What could come of this? Dr. Fuellmich, people are angry. People want justice.
Yes. I think we have to be very careful not to let this spin out of control into violence, because that's what they want. If we start to get acting violently, I think they're going to try and bring in their own troops, if they have any. I don't know about that. There's lots of rumors. We haven't been able to verify anything, but we should continue with peaceful protests. We should also continue with the efforts to refocus on our regions instead of this globalism. There's another factor to this. There's three levels on which we have to fight. One is education, bring out the truth, expose them all. The other is legal efforts. We have to continue with our legal efforts, in particular with the international legal efforts. But there's also this spiritual side. If you had told me about this a year ago, I would have said, yeah, right, take your pills. But and even Robert Malone agrees with that. I mean, he is a stone cold scientist. We all agree that there's something else. And that's spirituality. Some call it religion. I'm not a religious person because I don't believe in organized religion. It's all about power in my view. But there is a spiritual side to this. And I think we're going to get help from the spiritual side. This is what connects us, by the way. This is why so many of us, despite the fact that they claim, oh, I've lost many friends. Nah, not really. These people were never our friends. But we've made so many new friends, people who we immediately felt connected with without having to even talk for an hour or so. But there's an immediate connection. So this spirituality is going to help us. There is a spiritual force out there, and I've come to this conclusion after talking to someone from Australia, Aboriginal by the name of David Cole, very smart man. And I reminded him, David, I spoke to one of your people, a very famous, very old Aboriginal by the name of Max, and said, yeah, that's Uncle Max. He guided us through the ceremony a couple of weeks ago, but unfortunately he passed away.
Yeah.
Now, this man, when I spoke to him, he made a great impression on me, just like the indigenous people from Canada and the United States who I spoke with. They said, we're on your side. We're protecting you. Because for a while, I thought, when I go running with my dogs, I mean, I'm a perfect target for them. And they said, well, you are, but we're going to protect you no matter what happens. And I believe this is true. That's why when people tell me, don't you feel that, aren't you scared? Nah, I'm not scared. There's no other way. We have to fight, all of us. We have to stand up and fight.
Many people, Dr. Fuellmich, in this time have asked for deeper answers as to what's wrong with the world, and what, many people have run to God in this time for shelter, for comfort, for protection, for all of these things. I, much like you, am a person that just does not feel fear. We have a task, we are on the right side of history, and we have to do this at whatever cost. But again, what are the potential consequences for those that are guilty? If they are found guilty, what are the potential consequences for these people?
They're going to pay a very, very, very high price. I think ultimately we, the people, will turn this thing around. It's not the courts of law. The courts of law will then come in and clean up in the aftermath. There will be I'm absolutely convinced, there will be a real a final reckoning, which has been overdue for hundreds of years, probably. There will be a final reckoning. That's why I think they're going to pay a really steep price. And those who survive this, well, we're going to deal with them in the courts of law. Ultimately, if I look at the legal picture, which is evolving right now, but it's clear enough. It's like a huge puzzle of 1,000 pieces, but I think there's only 10 or 15 pieces missing. So you can see exactly what's going on, despite the fact that a couple of pieces are still missing. So this is, Mike Eden is right. The facts that we can see are compelling evidence, irrefutable evidence for premeditated murder. And for that, you have to pay a price. There is no immunity. Even under our legal systems, there is no immunity for anyone for premeditated murder. How can there be? So all of the doctors who are taking part in this, all of the pharmaceutical companies which are taking part in this, everyone who's involved in this, all of the people, all of the so-called VIPs, the politicians who are trying to talk people into getting the shots, they're all going to have to pay a very high price. And this price is, you can throw out a figure like everyone suffered damages because of what's been going on for the past 2 years. Everyone. So if you start with a price tag in damages of $1 million, that would probably not be too high. But we're not talking about just $1 million in pain and suffering, for example, if that's all you have. But there's going to be destroyed businesses, there's going to be your health destroyed. But if you start at $1 million, and I think that's a very low figure, you can multiply this because we're talking about intentional infliction of harm. Intentional infliction of harm leads us directly to what the Americans call punitive damages. Ultimately, The only way to pay for this is by taking apart all of these global corporations, taking back what they stole from us, and using their money for a brand new society, one that's humane, one that is built on cooperation, one that makes sense in the human sense.
Will they go to prison?
Yes. Those who survive the Great Reckoning, they're definitely going to go to prison. Yes.
What do you mean by those who survive?
I think there's going to be a great reckoning, and people, many of those who are responsible were stupid enough to take the shots themselves. I don't think they're going to survive that. I don't have a clear image of how this spiritual reckoning is going to work, but I think they're gonna have to pay a really, really, really high price. And that's why I'm saying the legal systems will, or our new legal system will deal with them, those of them who are still there. But we're only going to have to do the cleanup work, I think.
And have you got the support of lawyers all over the world in every country committed to the cause? I know that Tony Nikolic in Australia has been a great help. He's a dear friend of mine, and he's helped me too. Yeah. So, you know,
he's a great character. He's a great activist. He's tough. I love him. He's cool.
And so you've got people all over the world supporting you and on board with this, these public trials.
Yes, we're a big team. It's a team of people. There's no egos involved in this. None of us has to prove anything to any of us. We're doing it because we believe in what we're doing. And we know that this is really a fight of good against evil. And we know we're the good guys. We know it.
Mm-hmm. And this new system, this new society, who's responsible for dictating how that goes?
No one. It's just us. We're all going to set up our own systems of in our own regions. We're first going to start in our region because and we're all different. That's why I keep telling the people here in Europe, get rid of this fucking EU. The EU is only it's an instrument to steal money from the people, from the member states of the EU. That's why it was a very smart move of the British to leave the EU. And now the former Eastern European countries are about to leave the EU as well. We're going to have to start from scratch, build up our own systems, supply systems, as far as energy, as far as food is concerned, in our regions, and then connect with each other, exchange ideas. But never again shall we allow anyone to rule from above, from very far away.
And will we have an exposure of all of these organizations, all of these companies, everyone involved? Will that all be uncovered?
Yes, I think absolutely. No one's going to get away.
How can the public track this and track what's going on?
I think it's already happening. The news cannot be suppressed anymore. As I said, all of these so-called side effects, which are not side effects really, of the vaccinations cannot be swept under the rug anymore. 40% excess mortality. I mean, what more can you say? But if you want to get detailed information, we, the Corona Committee, I don't want to heap all this praise on ourselves, but the Corona Committee has interviewed over 150 experts from all walks of science. Luc Montagnier, he's a professor who won a Nobel Prize from France. Catherine Austin Fitz, I already mentioned her. Dr. Mike Yaden, Robert Malone, Peter McCullough, all of these people, we have interviewed them in great detail. Robert Malone was very hesitant at first. This is a few months ago, but in these few months, he has completely come around and understood that what he thought was conspiracy theories and involving the World Economic Forum, for example, is absolutely true. And he says it's in our face. You can read it. They're publishing this. They're so stupid. They're really stupid. But we must not underestimate them. We must take them seriously because they have paid a lot of people a lot of money to do their bidding, and many of them are in strategically important positions. So we have to deal with these people, and we will.
And this plan for the Great Reset, potentially the cyber COVID shutting down all the networks? Do we know any more about that?
Anything is possible. I don't think it's going to happen. There's so many rumors out there. There's so much panic mongering. Much of this is part of the illusion that they're creating. Much of this is part of the psychological operation, which depends to a large degree on keeping us disoriented, keeping us in a panic mode, keeping us in a position. There's a, what is it called, the Biderman chart of coercion. Incredible. You should look this up. This is from the 1950s or so. It is a deliberate psychological operation, which Professor Matthias Desmet explained to us. It's as though they are, and he says it's not as though, it is they're hypnotizing 30% of the population. This is how it works with 30% of the population. You cannot reach them anymore. Because if you're hypnotized, you can't see anything, you can't feel anything. And he compared this with an old Chinese technique. They in China, they still perform surgery, not all of them, but in some cases, by hypnotizing people. So if you have open heart surgery and you're being hypnotized, of course you can't listen to anything. You will not hear anything we're telling them. So that's what he said. But the good news is 40% of the population can still be reached. 40% are sort of sitting on the fence, don't know which way to get off, and they can still be approached by us. And more of them are waking up, including those who have gotten the shots because they feel that they've been fooled. All of a sudden, they're being told, no, you're unvaccinated because you haven't gotten your third shot or your fourth shot. And this is just
well, you're fifth in the Netherlands. You're fifth now. My goodness. And are the number of people that are vaccinated, what they're telling us, true? Because we just had a report out of the UK stating that there's only 25 million that have not even received one dose.
Yeah, I think the numbers are completely false. They're lying to us. They're lying whenever they're opening up their mouths. Here in Germany, we believe that 40% of the population have not been vaccinated yet. They claim that 80% or more have been vaccinated, but we don't believe that. The same is true in the United States, except in the United States, it's even worse as far as they're concerned, because we believe that maybe 50%, maybe 55% have been vaccinated, but no more. And now people from the healthcare industry are beginning to walk off their jobs. They're gonna shut down the entire healthcare business, and we're gonna do the same in Austria and in Germany, because we have founded unions, and one of the most important sections of these unions is the healthcare section, because we know that many members of the healthcare business, including nurses, for example, in particular nurses, will not get the shots. So they need protection, and that's why we founded these unions.
Right. And these unions, you plan to extend them globally, everywhere, set up for those people?
We're already discussing this amongst ourselves with the International Group of Lawyers. Yeah.
That's wonderful news. That's wonderful news. So there is hope. Many people are feeling like it is a lost cause, and the World Health Organization gave us this deadline of the 1st of July 2022 to fully vaccinate 70% of the world. And what does fully vaccinated mean to them by the 1st of July as they keep moving the goalposts? But we are saying that there is hope. Dr. Fuellmich, you've got a Telegram, and the website that the people can find you on as well, my apologies, the Corona Investigative Committee.
Yeah, you can find it. I think much of this is in English, or I think there's a button English. If you push that, then everything comes up in English. I don't know a lot about these IT things, but if you want to look it up, the German, the website is corona-ausschuss, AUSSCUSS.de. Ausschuss is the German word for committee. And of course, I have my Telegram channel, which my friend and our manager, Corvin Robinstein, handles. And I mean, I get hundreds and hundreds of emails every day, but my colleagues filter them so that ultimately I get about 100 per day. But then there's another 150 or so text messages through Threema, Telegram, Signal, Wire, all these messenger services. Plus, I have to write my briefs. Last night, I wrote a couple of briefs. Plus, I have to do interviews, be on Zoom calls and phone conferences, et cetera, et cetera. But I know it's worth it, and I know we're making progress.
That's good to hear. What I will do is after this interview, I will include those links for the audience so that they can track what's going on your Telegram. Will there be an announcement on your Telegram about this 2-week international court? Yes, there will be. Okay.
Yes, there will be. We're going to try and get as much attention for this trial because there's so many really good people working on this, as much attention as possible, because we do know that, as Catherine Austin Fitts says, it's not just about getting the indictments, it's about giving the people a factual and a legal platform on which to stand up, rise up, and fight these bastards. We're probably going to have a couple of constitutional law professors who will give us their view on whether we can really do this, because the German constitution, unlike all of the others, has a section 20 subsection 4, which explicitly gives the people a right to resist if there is evidence that someone is trying to is trying to get rid of the Constitution or democracy altogether. And there's not just some evidence, there's clear and convincing evidence that that's what's happening right now, because they're trying to introduce a fascist system, and that's why they have to get rid of democracy.
And how do the people get involved worldwide with what's happening?
I think the most important thing is to just get the information and spread it. Give the information to as many people as possible, because that is what empowerment is all about. You have to know what's going on. You have to know the true facts.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly think that telling people that are on the fence that there are international crimes against humanity being lodged, cases being lodged for this, surely this would prick up their ears. I mean, I personally have been talking to people who are saying, there's no way I'm going back for more. This is ludicrous. So there are people that are waking up, and yes, you're right, 30% of the population, they cannot wake up. They may even believe after it's all out in the open that this was all for our health, but the power is still in the people. Dr. Reiner Fuellmich, thank you so much. For the audience, please do subscribe to this channel. I will include all the links at the bottom in the end. Thank you for watching, and share this information everywhere. Everyone must know that the lies are being exposed. They can no longer hide this plan. This global mass depopulation kill shot has to stop. Good night, everyone, and good night, Dr. Reiner Fuellmich.
Thank you, and good luck. Do not give up. Fight.
Thank you. We will not stop. Good night, everyone.